everybody. And I hope you guys had a great week. This is Friday night, and this is actually my very first time filming for this channel on Friday night. Usually I'm filming on Sunday night, so it is a more somber mood because we're getting the week started. We're ending the week this time, and I don't know, the older that I'm getting, something about being at home on a Friday night with a glass of wine on a sectional with my cat, it just hits different, okay? Like, it really just hits different. Like, all I can say is, like, we're not adulting anymore, we're adults, okay? And you can say that again. Like, it's just a different feeling. And I don't know, maybe because I'm pushing 30 at this point, like, I'm gonna be 30 in 2 years, but it's just like, you know, it just hits different. But yeah, I hope you guys all had a really great week. Today I am just doing my 5th installment, and I can't believe I'm on number 5, but it's my 5th installment of Unhinged Newspaper Stories of the past. Every single one of the stories that I'm going to be reading today are out of the New Haven Union on the paper dated April 7th of 1912. I will actually say that when I first saw the front cover of it, there's a photo of like a ship there, and I just thought the Titanic happened like the next week, because the Titanic actually occurred on April 15th of 1912. So this is like very, very, very close to, like, you know, the Titanic disaster, but that was another maritime disaster or something. I'm not sure. I never really 100% looked into the story, but just some background. The New Haven Union was actually born out of an 1870 printer strike in New Haven, Connecticut. And that strike led to the formation of the Independent Labor Party in Connecticut. And in order to support that party did actually print, you know, they put into print several newspapers. And the New Haven Union is one of those papers. The Evening Union is what it started out as back in the 1870s before becoming the New Haven Union in the 1890s. And that ran up until about the 1920s. They were a staunchly Democratic paper. And that paper, you know, they were like very pro-union, pro-strike, which is, you know, several of the stories I'm going to be reading today, you know, they're kind of tied to that. And then on top of that, they were also like pro-suffrage and things like that. So many of the stories that I have there was definitely a lot of material to choose from, I am going to say. And this was a 56-page paper. Usually the ones that I read are like 4, 5, 6 pages at most. This was like 56 pages, so there was a lot of material to choose from. So again, I'm going to be reading the April 7th, 1912 edition of the New Haven Union based out of New Haven, Connecticut. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and get into our very first story. So I did mention that the New Haven Union was born out of a printer's strike in 1870. So they are very pro-union, very pro-strikers. And several videos ago, I did a video on like Luigi, the whole Brian situation, and definitely the growing popularity of unions and strikes in the Gilded Age and the Progressive Era. Again, this paper is dated April of 1912, so that is during the Progressive Era when a lot of these things would have been very common. You know, this is like the happenings of that era. So this one is titled, "Railroad Men Believe That a Walkout is Only Matter of a Few Days, Meetings Today." As the date for the tabulation of the locomotive engineers poll, April 10th, draws near, the belief that a general strike is to be precipitated as a result of the wage increases demand is being strengthened in railroad circles. At Union Depot last night, a number of railroad employees, including brakemen, conductors, and others, discussed prospects of a strike and also the possibilities of other classes of employees demanding a wage increase. These men, who are well in touch with the situation, were of the opinion that the results of the poll would be for a walkout, that the railroads would refuse the second demand, and that the head officials of the Locomotive Engineers Brotherhood had enough fighting blood in their veins and enough confidence in their power to order the walkout. The big rock, however, according to these men, which is in the way of the engineers, is the Interstate Commerce Engineers, commerce tie-up freight and passenger traffic, and would be felt from one end of the country to the other. What they would do and what action they would take is problematic. So again, these men are getting ready to protest. They're actually doing a walkout And it is very interesting that one thing I did want to note here is that they do say that the second demand would actually be denied and refused by the railroads. It seems here that the walkout is kind of inevitable, obviously, because they think that their demands for a wage increase aren't going to be met by those on top, which again was very, very common at the time, as I mentioned in my video, like several videos ago. But what they're actually most concerned about is the way that this is actually going to impact, you know, obviously like traffic and commerce for those who utilize railroads around the country, you know, from one end of the country to the other. This is of course 1912, so railroads are very, 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 you know, trains are a very popular form of like transportation. Cars and vehicles and stuff like that, even though they weren't obviously quite as common as they are today. So again, yeah, this is the very, very first story. I thought that was a really, really good one. It most definitely speaks to the attitudes of that time, but most definitely speaks to the attitudes of the New Haven Union themselves, as of course they were a newspaper born out of, you know, unionizing and striking. So I thought that was a really, really cool one to start off with. On to our next stories. These next two ones are like pretty short ones, but I just found these two really fascinating as well. They're those stories that are kind of like head scratchers. You're like, gee, I kind of wonder what was going on. So this next one is called Sue's Banker for $150,000. $150,000 in 1912 is the equivalent of $4,880,489 today. So that is a huge sum of money that this banker is being sued for. So this is New York, April 6th. So Arthur F. Luke, a member of the banking firm of Luke, Banks and Weeks, an intimate friend of J.P. Morgan and formerly treasurer of the United States Steel Corporation, was made the defendant today in a $150,000 suit for breach of promise to marry. Ellie F. Hayden, who is said to be about 40 years of age, filed in the Supreme Court a complaint in which she charges that in August 1909, Mr. Luke gave her his promise to marry her, to make her his wife, and she agreed to wait a reasonable time for him to do so. She has since remained single in expectation, she says, of becoming Mrs. Luke. So I guess Mr. Arthur Luke promised to marry Miss Ellie. And this was in 1909, so this was several years ago at this point. This is April of 1912 now, and she still is not Mrs. Luke. So she sued him for $150,000 for failure to marry her. What are the legal grounds of that? Like what? I don't know. I really do hope Miss Ellie Hayden found love though, because being a single woman of 40 years of age in 1912, I feel like that was pretty rough. But yeah, Luke, definitely do better. RIP to both of them. This next one is called Boy Smashed 17 Windows, because I always love like a bit of delinquency. Don't you think it's kind of funny? So right here it says, Patrolman Hornan of the Grand Avenue precinct rounded up a gang of 7 youths in the James Street district yesterday for breaking 17 windows in the shop of H.G. Shepard and Sons and brought them before the police court by noon. They were Charles Clark, Rudolph Hinckley, Joseph Hinckley, William Fisher, Roy Clancy, Thomas Young, and Fred Turbett, all 12 years old. Their cases went over to Saturday morning. These are all 12-year-old boys. They were all born in 1900, 1899? What's going on with kids these days? I don't know, 12 years old. And they broke 17 windows in the shop of H.G. Shepard and Sons. So they just broke and smashed the windows to one business? Okay. I do like how it listed first and last names though. It's not like first initial, middle initial, last name. And they do, of course, have very, very old-timey names. Rudolph Hinckley and Joseph Hinckley are clearly brothers. I wonder if they're twins, if they're all 12. I don't know. Yeah. A bit of delinquency there, a bit of deviancy there. Wonder what they had going on at home. This next one is called The Roller Skating Nuisance. I didn't actually screenshot the entire story because it was much longer, but I did screenshot the first 3 paragraphs because I thought those kind of they were a really nice summation. So the union is in receipt of several hot complaints against what the protesters are pleased to characterize as the roller skating nuisance, okay? One elderly gentleman, because it's always an old man, who lives up Howard Avenue, writes that he has been knocked down twice within a week and feels that it is hardly safe for him to venture from his own doorstep any of these fine spring evenings. There's no doubt that this spring our level streets have been well filled with enthusiastic youthful skaters, that a certain amount of carelessness among some of them has caused our police and pedestrians considerable annoyance. In fact, the situation has gone to such an extent, from bad to worse, that Chief of Police Cowles has recently advocated a park for skaters. Shocker, that's crazy. The Waterbury Republican, which reports a similar trouble in Waterbury, and commenting upon Chief Cowles' idea, says that it looks very much as if one of the two things will have to be done soon. Abolish roller skating or provide outdoor skating places to which skaters can be confined. This one is so funny to me, the old man complaining, and I mean, yeah, you shouldn't be knocking old men down, like, please do a better job at that. But then also, like, how they're like, we're gonna either abolish roller skating or we're just gonna provide like a skate park for them, which I feel like is the more natural response. Like, maybe let's give them a skate park instead of like, and how do you abolish roller skating? And I also kind of wonder what roller skating would have looked like in those like Edwardian gowns, and you know, like those, like, I like just the way that people dressed back then. Like, what did roller skating look like? But I do love how they call it the roller skating nuisance, and they're like, let's provide them skate parks. It's just, I just thought this was a pretty good one. Yeah. Also, I don't know how to roller skate. I think it's too late, but some of my favorite photos are like of people roller skating, and the fact that I can't do it is just so criminal. This next story is titled "Traffic Tied Up at Corner by a Woman." OMG. So traffic at Church and Crown Streets was held up for over 15 minutes last night while a mob of several hundred people watched the efforts of Police Sergeant Spencer and two policemen as they attempted to assist an intoxicated woman to her feet. The woman was well dressed and carried several packages in her arms. Shortly after 10 o'clock, she appeared at the corner and after staggering about for some time, fell to the sidewalk. Instantly, the crowd gathered, and at one time, it looked as though a riot call would have to be turned in to clear the streets. Streetcars, delivery wagons, and automobiles were held up. Finally, the Bluecoats got the woman onto a West Haven car and streets were cleared. Okay, I do find it funny whenever people are kind of like, nowadays, people just like take out their phones and film. They wouldn't do anything. Baby, this is 1912. This is literally 113 years ago, and they're not doing anything. This woman is drunk out of her mind. She's like tripping and falling over the place, and they're like, let's just watch. Like, they're just watching her, and then the police have to come and like actually do something about it. So again, pre-smartphone, and they're not doing anything but like watching. They're basically like world star hip hopping with their eyes, okay? Like, that's what's happening. But this is just, it's a really funny one. Just a mess. Y'all are messy. Y'all are so messy, but I'm not even surprised because honestly, the same thing would happen today. It's just that it would be viral. Like, it would go viral on like Twitter or something, or like Instagram, but it's the same nonsense you'd hear today, okay? Y'all would look, but y'all wouldn't do a dang thing, okay? And I don't know if I would either. When I first introduced this paper, I did mention that this paper did have like strong ties to like, you know, pro-union, pro-strike, all those things, but they also were tied to like the suffragist movement. And what's very fascinating about this specific paper is that on this April 7th edition, they actually have people's opinions on the suffrage movement and the right for women to vote. So I'm going to read 3 of them, and I just found these so fascinating. 1912, again, is 8 years before the 19th Amendment was actually ratified, which gave women the right to vote all over the country. There are several states that women were actually allowed to vote before the ratification of the 19th Amendment. As far as Connecticut is concerned, women did not get the right to vote until September of 1920. So that was after the ratification of the 19th Amendment, you know, with women's suffrage. So in 1912 in Connecticut, women could not vote yet. So I'm just gonna go ahead and read some of these opinions because let's just go ahead and get into some of them. I'm going to read 3 of them. So, Miss H possesses a conviction of the sympathy of women and the necessity for domestic duties when she says, resolved, that women should vote. She is in the negative. Okay, I think that the women of the United States should not vote, because they would not be able to take care of public affairs. If the women voted, the men would not be able to hold office because someone would have to take care of the house. If they had a servant, she would be a woman and would vote too, and perhaps be elected to hold some office. The women who would vote for the people they liked instead of the clever persons. Women couldn't fight. In the Declaration of Independence, it says that all men are created equal, and it doesn't say anything about the women. If a crime was committed, a woman couldn't tell whether to have the person hanged or not. She would feel sorry for him and set him free. This opinion is so unhinged, especially from the fact that it's actually from a woman. And I did notice that a lot of the anti-women being able to vote people were like women, but like her reasoning given is like women are like low-key empathetic is something that I do see again, and I'm probably gonna get into one of those stories too, but it's just like women would vote for who they liked. Doesn't everybody vote for who they like? Like, girl, what are you talking about? It's like a person, whatever. Anyway, so that was Miss H's opinion. It just says Miss H, but she's like, no, women should not vote. So let's go. The next one is Master G, and he's quite patriotic as well, and he's appreciative of women in his paper, which follows that women should vote. Affirmative. If loafers, bums, and tramps have a right to vote, then shouldn't women have a right to vote? The character of women is better, or at least as good as that of men. The women have brains and they ought to use them in politics. They are as intelligent and perhaps more intelligent than men. Women who hold property have to pay taxes, which amount to the same tax rate as for men. Why shouldn't they vote? In days that have gone by, some women have been as brave as men. Some of the brave women are Molly Pitcher, Han Hutchinson, Clara Barton, and many others. The women have formed the Red Cross Society, which takes care of the sick and wounded on the battlefield. They can do as much work as men, and they ought to have the delicate work to do in offices. Many women are more honest than men. Why shouldn't women vote? You know what, Master G? You ate that. I wish I had your last name, but they just titled you Master G. R.I.P. to you. But you know what? That opinion, it eats. Let's get into the last opinion, which is also a negative, but this is Miss O. Pays tribute to the kind-heartedness of her sex when she says resolved that women should vote. Negative. The United States has gotten along and prospered, and I think it could get along now without women voting. The women are easily influenced by wealth, and the women candidate might go around and try to make the people think she was just right, but when she held office, she might stop this and be hard on the people. A woman would not be strong enough to enforce the law. She could not bear to think of a man being hanged even if he deserved it. In the Declaration of Independence, it says that all men are created equal. It does not say anything about women. So this is another woman in her opinion on it, and it's basically like the very, very first woman. This is Miss O. The very first lady was Miss H, and she's just like, women are too empathetic and women would vote for who they like. She's like, they're easily influenced by wealth. Girl, look who they just put in office. Girl, come over to 2025 and see this mess, okay? I'm just like, I'm laughing at some of these opinions because they're so unhinged. Like, what are you talking about? But I do understand that it's 1912. But I also like how they keep bringing up about like being hanged. Like, this is the 1910s. This is like the peak of lynchings in this country, when somebody would be accused of a crime or just in jail and like a lynch mob would show up, drag them from the freaking cell, string them up on a tree and just like shoot them to death or something. Like, it was just an awful time for like craziness in America. And they're like, women wouldn't have someone hanged, so they shouldn't vote. Anyway, they did get the right to vote 8 years later in Connecticut. So those were just some of the stories that appeared on one of the 56 pages of the New Haven Union on that day on April 7th, the week of April 7th, 1912. There are some other stories. There's one about Jack Johnson, who was like planning to retire that Labor Day, but had been offered like $30,000 to like compete against somebody. There's also another one that I found really funny about like Jack Malleef, who was like a retired world champion. And he talked about like present day boxers. And there is this quote where he goes, I was asked the other day if the fighter of the present time has improved over the fighter of the previous generation. Fighter is a word that covers a lot of ground. Now, no disrespect to the so-called champions or near champions, especially in my class. The way that he says fighter is a word that covers a lot of ground is peak shade. Like, that is so freaking funny to me. But yeah, those are just like some of the other stories. There was just, again, so much material to choose from. I don't want to go into everything, but yeah, these were just the stories, some of the stories that appeared on the April 7th, 1912 edition of the New Haven Union. I found a lot of those very interesting, fascinating, my favorite words, just like basically, and I just wanted to share a couple of those with you. But yeah, that was the 5th installment of Unhinged Newspaper Stories. I thought a lot of those were definitely unhinged, but thanks again so much for your time. I hope this time, we're not getting into the week, we're ending the week. I hope you guys all have a an absolutely wonderful, productive, and blessed weekend. I know, I sure hope that I do, because I'm probably gonna go to sleep right after this. I might watch something though. I'm pretty sure there's like some good true crime or something like that to watch. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching as always. And yeah, I hope you guys have an amazing weekend.